everybody, it's Carole from Big Cat Rescue, and this is the Cat Chat Show. I met Tori Dileo in person at the Jackson Hole Wildlife Film Festival, and I've known her for a long time because of her blog, and she's always been really wonderful to cats and big cats, and so I thought, man, people would love to meet her. So thank you so much for joining us today, Tori.
No, thank you so much for having me. This is great.
And the name of your blog is purrandroar.com, is that correct?
Yes.
And I was just on there, and I saw one of your most recent articles was about the Lion Arc, and that was a great movie. But I love the way in your blog you give the entire rundown in text and with photos and videos, and you really flesh out the entire story for your readers and your viewers.
Yeah, and I understand that sometimes text can be a little heavy for people. So where possible and where it's appropriate, obviously, I try to break it up with either photos from that specifically have to do with the piece. And with that particular interview, it was really easy because I attended the screening myself. And so I took some photos myself, and then I took a few photos from other people. And then, of course, they had video of the trailer, which was really easy to put in.
That's great. And yeah. You said when we were chatting before we went live here that it was kind of unique for you to be interviewed because usually you're the interviewer. So can you tell everybody how that came to be? How did you come to be the interviewer of all of these people that are working with cats?
Well, when I started the blog, I think it's been about 3.5 years now, and it's definitely changed over the years, but it was just sort of another facet that, showed it was my interest basically, because anyone that I interview or that I talk about on the blog, I have a genuine interest in. And I just thought, I'm going to reach out to people and see if they're open to it. And so far, everyone that I've reached out to is been open to interview, and I think it just gives readers another perspective other than mine on the topic.
And how long ago did you start I've got you in two places here. I don't know what I did. Oh, there we go.
I started, it was really an important time because in 2014 of March, we had the Global March for Lions. It was one of the first ones in North America, and I believe a lot of places in the U.S. had it as well. In Toronto, which is where I'm from, I was one of the organizers of that event. So I actually started the blog at the same time the march happened. So that was one of my first posts, and it was really appropriate because people were just starting to talk about canned hunting in South Africa, and the world was kind of just waking up to this horrible practice, and a lot of people were just not aware of it. And that was when I started. So that was my first post, and it was appropriate that it took place at such an important time.
Were you a journalist prior to blogging online?
No, I have a fine arts degree, and I've always enjoyed writing. I've been writing since I was a kid too, and I have books that I created for grade school. I still have them somewhere. So I was always into writing, and I always enjoyed it, whether it was essays or just even emails. And when I started the blog, it was my idea. I had to put all of this sort of creative energy into one place. It was really my outlet. And when I started it was just that. It was just an outlet. I wanted to talk about these issues, and I wanted people to hopefully become aware of them because, like I said, there's just a lot of things that people aren't aware of.
How did you come to know about the Global March for Lions? Were you involved in animal rescue at the time?
No, so I've been very fortunate. I've done a lot of traveling to Africa, and when I was there in 2007, I happened to be doing some volunteer work, and Chris Mercer, who is, if you look him up, he's one of the people that really started talking about canned hunting. And while I was volunteering, he just happened to come and give a talk about his book and canned hunting. So this is going back 10 years. And at the time, I knew there was hunting, but, maybe I was a little more naive then. I just didn't know about this issue. So he talked about it, and it was, just your world kind of explodes and you start to see things differently. And then I was sending emails to people about it. So by the time the actual march came along, there was a movement, but here in North America, it took a while to take hold. And so I had always known about it, and I was always talking to people about it. And then I just happened to put that into the blog. And then in Toronto, we had a group of people who were involved with, there's, of course, animal rights and helping, animal welfare. And, of course, people were always involved with helping elephants and rhinos. So they decided that during this time, it was, appropriate that Toronto have our own global March for Lions. So it was the first one, and it was really successful. So we did... we had public outreach and education. We had people signing petitions. So that's kind of how it started. So it was something I was aware of for quite a long time, and it just it took that amount of time for it to get here. It takes a while sometimes to get these issues out to the public.
I think Chris Mercer's website is cannedhunt.org.
Yes, it's cannedhunting.org. So he has
hunting.org.
Canned Hunting, and he has a tremendous amount of information on there. And of course, it's always ongoing. Even if I'm not talking about it all the time, you have people that are dedicated to it all the time, because it's just because we stop talking about it, it doesn't go away. It's still happening.
He's such a perfect example of one person making a huge difference, because like you said, he was out there shouting in the darkness before anybody was paying any attention to these canned hunts. And here he I'm assuming you heard him while you were in South Africa, and then you took that message back to Toronto.
No, he was, like I said, he came to, I was actually volunteering with penguins. It had nothing to do with lions. And the organization had him come in, and he was talking about his book. He had a book at the time that he was releasing, and he talked about canned hunting and some other issues as well. So it was I think it was really appropriate, and I'm fortunate that I was able to find out about this when, and then pass that message on, basically.
The March for Lions that happened in 2014, gosh, it doesn't seem like it was that long ago.
It's a long time ago, yeah.
And I think in 2015, I think they had another one, and then it kind of fell apart. Are you aware of what happened there?
I'm not sure. In 2015, I was still writing about it and doing stuff on social media. I wasn't involved. I'm speaking here in Toronto. I wasn't involved in the 2015 one, and the people that I had worked with previously weren't either. So it kind of fizzled. And, there's the Global March for Elephants and Rhinos has remained really strong. So I know that they actually will include lions in that as well.
Yeah, this year they are.
Yeah, they did. And I'm not sure what it was like in the States, if there were any marches, if there was another March for Lions specifically in the States either. I can't speak to that. But it kind of, it feels a little, and I'm not sure why. And, but then we were lucky enough, we have Blood Lions, right? Which is the film that basically exposes canned hunting. I mean, that came out in 2015. So, I don't know if it just fizzled or just took sort of another turn, but it's hard. There's a lot of issues to keep on top of people's minds. And sometimes I think, that's just the nature. It's not that it completely goes away, but it just may have another form.
I know here at the sanctuary, the first year and I think the second year, what we decided to do was we don't allow people to just wander around the sanctuary. They have to come on guided tours. But we decided we would have a march through the sanctuary so people could come. We'd have 500 people just come through the sanctuary. And we did that march for 2 years because it was the March for Lions in March. And then it got moved into later in the year, and it was like, well, it's kind of weird to call it the March for Lions when it's not really tied to March. And there weren't other organizations doing it around the globe from what we could tell. And so it has morphed into our Wildcat Safari, or Safari Days is what we call it now. But that's coming up on November 4th, and we've completely sold out for it.
Oh, wow, that's great.
And so what we did as kind of a tribute to the the March for Lions idea is that people pay $25, but then we give them 5 tickets, and they can choose 5 different conservation projects. And so each year we have 5 different conservation projects, and they can put their ticket in where they want their money to go for each one of those. So all of the money that's raised that day actually goes back to the wild, to saving the animals in the wild, which is where we believe they belong.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I mean, that's the idea, right? It's sanctuaries are so important. We need them, but we also need to preserve habitat and preserve the animals in the wild. Like that ideally should be our goal, or one of our main goals for sure.
Are you involved in, or not involved in so much as, are you aware of some of the issues that Canada faces as far as their laws when it comes to exotic captive cats?
Yeah, we're not the greatest. I've had this discussion with some people that are working in like animal justice law, etc. I think we're kind of behind the U.S. in a lot of things. In terms of owning exotic pets, it's sort of all over. It's all over the place. And Ontario, the province where I'm from, is probably one of the worst offenders in terms of regulating that. And I know that they've been in talks to try and change that, and it's currently in talks, but it seems to be taking a long time. And that's with regards to private ownership of big cats, not conservation. That's something different. And then when it comes to conservation, in terms of our own native cats, that would be the mountain lion and the lynx. I say that there's lots of room for improvement needed with regards to that as well. Yeah.
I never thought of Canada as being a problem area for captive wildlife, or captive cats especially. I always thought the U.S. was absolutely the worst, but it seems like lately I'm hearing more and more people from Canada saying that they think they have a problem there.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, it's frustrating because there are people who want to change that, and I think our government tends to be slow. And I'm just not sure what it is. I've also had this discussion with people on, like, why does it seem that, with such a progressive country and how people perceive us, that we're behind in a lot of things. And I don't have an answer for that. I think it's slowly starting to change, but we have a lot of work to do. We have hunting and trapping, and it's a huge part of the culture, as to say, and where you don't have a lot of sort of pushback on that. And, we have, there's organizations recently with the bear hunt, trying to ban the bear hunt, and there's still issues around that. So that's a start. But in terms of the cats, I find we don't talk about them. It's just not something that is a priority here for some reason. And I'm not sure why. And a couple years ago, there was a rally for Cecil the lion, and it was basically to talk about trophy hunting. And a number of places, like I know the U.S. had a number of cities that had rallies and I guess public outreach sessions, and we had one here in Toronto. There was actually a bunch of us that went down to our downtown core, and I was part of that. And so it was basically to educate people on trophy hunting, because a lot of Canadians just don't know. We think of that as an issue that's, very American, or it happens on the other side of the world. So I took that opportunity to not talk about the African lion, but to talk about our mountain lions, because a lot of people don't know we have them and don't know that they're hunted. So, it was a really great day. I gave out a lot of information, and, a lot of, like, that population of, say, mountain lions is basically on the West Coast, and we're on the East Coast. So people here are maybe far removed from it, but they were surprised to hear, you can hunt mountain lions here. Like, it's just people didn't know. So I think it's sometimes where people in cities maybe are removed from that wilderness, or, it's on the other side of the country, so people don't think about it. And when people find out, they're shocked that certain things are happening.
Yeah, that's the one thing I hear more frequently than anything else from mostly people that come to the sanctuary is, I had no idea. They just have no idea some of the horrible things that are going on out there. So that's why... Go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Well, that's why blogs like yours are so important, because you can reach a growing audience of people.
Yeah, and that was always my intention. This is my side project. It's my passion project. I do it whenever I can. I obviously don't have the time to write all the time. A lot of the heavier pieces require a lot of research, so I like to take my time with those, but I'm always sharing on social media, Twitter or Facebook, because that's a little bit easier to get everything out, because no one person can cover everything. It's impossible. There's just so much happening, and it's happening all the time, and it becomes overwhelming. So I think that, this is where I come from, and I say this, that every person can make a difference. Like, you just have to find that little part that you want to concentrate on, and do what you can. And that's why I chose to focus on the cats. First, I've loved them my whole life. I'm obsessed with them. So that was my niche. And, I try, and I always want to do more. For me, I would love to do more. There's so many things I would love to cover. And I hope to do more, of course, whenever I can.
I'm assuming that the reason that you're saying you can't do it full time is because your blog does not support you currently.
Yeah, it was just a side project, so it's not something. I mean, I would love to, be able to go out and do interviews and research and fly to places and do that, but it's funded by myself. So currently it's not, and I do have to have a day job, unfortunately. Yeah.
That is the struggle, because you clearly have a talent, and yet, like you said, it's like having a full-time job to try and cover those issues. I had been watching your blog since the Wildlife Film Festival, thinking, oh my gosh, there were so many interesting people there, and I bet she's going to have so much good content. But I'm sure the reason that it's not there yet is because you're probably still researching it and still dealing with being away for a week and all of those things.
Yeah, the conference was fantastic. It took a lot out of me. Like, it was overwhelming in a good way, but I came back exhausted from it. And I think it's like mentally and emotionally, you have a lot of excitement, and in my head while I was there, I was like having all these ideas, and I'm like, I want to do some this, and then you have to come back to reality. And yeah, it's definitely, I have to play catch up. And it's also, I made a lot of good contacts, and I want to do some interviews with some of these researchers. So it's also going to depend on their time as well, because these people have a job. Sometimes they're out in the field, sometimes they can't answer right away. So things will come in slowly, and I hope to have, enough content for a while. And I get to that as soon as I can, and as soon as I can get everyone on board. And I always like to do as much research on something before for example, before I interview somebody. I want to do research on them or the work. So a lot of stuff I knew about, which is great. But then when you talk to somebody, you get these other ideas, and it's like, oh, maybe I'll, try this angle. So I have a checklist of people to get through, and I definitely will be bringing that to the blog, like 100%. Yeah.
And I think that's really important, because these people who are, like you said, out in the bush or out in the jungles, they are doing some amazing work, but most of them do not have either access to the internet to be able to report the stuff that they're doing, or even the capacity to really relay the story in a way that grips people's hearts. And yet what they're doing is so important and so underfunded. So it really means a lot that there are people like you that are following them and getting to know them, getting their story out to people who can make a difference for them.
Yeah, and it was really nice. I mean, there were so many, you were there. There were like so many amazing conservationists, and it was kind of like my celebrity, right? That was my version of being like starstruck by people. Speaking to, for instance, George Schaller, the biologist. I mean, he was such an incredible man, and his insight into things, he just tells it like it is. And he said, we need to do A, B, C, D, and that's it. And there was no crazy fanfare. And I love that. I love the honesty of people. And, I love the passion of people there. And yeah, it's something that I want to bring to people who normally wouldn't get to see that. I mean, that's what it's all about. There's people that love cats and people that love wild cats. And, I'm kind of on the really end of the spectrum where I like this stuff is, since I was a kid, I've been reading about this stuff and I've been researching. So it's something that, it's just something that I want to be able to bring to people and hopefully, inspire them and just even something to think about, something that, how our sort of impact on the world affects them as well.
How have you seen the growth of your blog and your social sites over the years? You started in 2014, you said?
Yeah, I started March of 20, I think it would have been the end of March 2014. Yeah. At the time, I wasn't working, so I had a lot of time and I was just writing all the time. And it was great because I had the time to do that. And then I sort of, as I got back into work, I had to sort of manage that. You work a regular job, you're all day on the computer, and then you come home and do it. So my posts have slowed a little bit depending on life, because sometimes life happens and, I don't always have the time that I want to. It's definitely grown it, and it's really interesting because the majority of my followers are in the US, and that was really interesting. That was really interesting to see.
That is interesting.
Yeah, and I don't know why that is, but there are obviously readers from Canada, but I have a majority of people from the US.
Maybe there's just more people here.
Well, yeah, your population is bigger than ours, and I'm not sure why that is. And I have friends here who share my stuff, so it gets out that way too, right? It gets out via Facebook, and you can't always see who's getting it that way. But that's another option. But when I do check the stats, it's a lot of Americans. So that's great. And for me, I don't think it matters, because a lot of the issues that we're talking about, there's no borders. Like, it doesn't matter which country you live in. I think we can all relate. I think we have something to learn from each other as well. So for me, I try not to focus too much on that, because it's just about people, learning something and then maybe telling a friend or sharing it, and maybe they live in a different country, maybe they live on the other side of the world. There's no borders. We all have similar issues with regards to big cats, whether it's conservation or, say hunting or trapping, or even big cats in captivity.
As you look back over the posts that you've done in the past and the people that you've interviewed, are there people or topics that really stood out to you as something where you felt like this was something you didn't know going into it and then came out of it with a much greater understanding?
Any of the pieces I do where they're really heavily researched, I learn a lot myself. I mean, I wish I could say I know everything, but nobody knows everything. I think it's always about learning, and it's about exposing yourself to new things. So, I mean, I've done quite a few. In terms of the interviews, I've interviewed people that either I've read a book on, or like their film. And so I knew quite a lot about it, but it's interesting because you get their perspective, which is a little different. So, for instance, I've done quite a few stories on P22, the mountain lion from Griffith Park. So I've been following his story from the beginning. So I've been a really big supporter of that and the whole campaign. And I really love the way that just shows everyone how, this city of LA, this densely populated city, is trying to coexist and trying to do better. So for me, that's great. And I've interviewed Beth Pratt Bergstrom on her book. And that was phenomenal. She has a wealth of information and experience. So for me, that was a longer interview, and I chose to leave it like that because there's just so much. You don't want to edit out this knowledge and this experience people have. So in terms of interviews, that's probably it. And then, I did a 3-part series called The Cost of Doing Business, which was basically looking at, things that we are doing to the earth, whether it's mining or drilling for oil, and how that affects wildlife. So those pieces, during the research, I learned a lot. And there was one particular piece that was the last part of that series, where it talks about Colorado and drilling for oil, and how basically they have a management plan in place to kill, bears and mountain lions. And there's this huge connection, and it's just something I never thought about that. We think of the impact of oil when it's drilled and we have accidents, and it spills, but is there an impact before that even happens? And there is, and it's happening in more places than Colorado. And I understand with the Florida panther, there's the big Cypress Reserve where I think they're doing oil exploration now, I believe. So that's, that could definitely impact them. So for me, I mean, that's something I learned. And, I had some of my readers say, I had no idea, I'm from there. I'm from Colorado. Like, thanks for bringing this to my attention. And it's really interesting. And sometimes it's, when you open something up, it's like opening up Pandora's box, because what you see, you're not going to like. And that's the unfortunate truth with a lot of things now. It's facing things that we don't want to face.
And I think the biggest challenge that all of us have is time. There's just so much information coming to us from so many different directions, and being able to focus our attention on something long enough to really make a difference with it, I think, is difficult. So for you to spend all of that time and energy really getting down to the bottom of an issue and then giving kind of the Reader's Digest to people is a way that they can have the facts and understand that somebody has put in all of that hard work to make that available to them.
Yeah, it's definitely, I see it as it's a big responsibility. For that one piece on Colorado, I stumbled across a series of 7 articles from the Boulder Weekly, and I read these articles, and they're pretty long, and I know not everybody's going to read them, so I tried to summarize it and take that information so that people could get the gist of what they were talking about. And then, if they desire, go read those 8 articles, because you should if you really want to find out. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard sometimes because I really want to make sure that I'm doing it justice, and I'm doing, the sources I'm getting it from justice. So yeah, I can't write those articles all the time. I would love to, but they're definitely part of what I really enjoy with this blog. I do love the lighter stuff. I think we need fun stuff. We need stories that are uplifting. People need a break. They can't have that serious stuff all the time. So I try to break it up as much for them as I do me, because sometimes I need a break for it too. And I'm sure because you see probably a lot of stuff. It's mentally, it's a challenge sometimes. You need a break from it.
That's for sure. Wow. As I sit here, I'm always trying to think, how do we monetize whatever we're doing so that we can continue to do it better? And so I'm thinking, well, I'm wondering what different ways she could monetize her blog. And yet at the same time, sometimes just by virtue of the fact that a blog or a work effort is monetized, then it can give people the feeling like it's not a balanced report. So is that something that you've struggled with, as far as like what kind of advertisers you might bring on, as to whether or not that would hamper the message that you're putting out?
I haven't really given too much to advertisers. I think the form that I'm doing it now, I would have to change things a little bit. But you bring up a good point, because sometimes, it's like people, if you work for a certain organization, there's certain things you can't talk about, even though it may be something you don't personally believe in. So that probably would be a balance. And for me, it's something that I've thought about, like if that ever happened where my blog evolved to that point, or I had an opportunity to do something, for me, keeping it honest, and it's also a lot of it's my opinion too, and my personal beliefs, but that's really the core of what this is about. There's certain things that are non-negotiable for me. I don't believe in sport hunting or trophy hunting. I understand it, and I've written about it. I don't understand why people do it. I don't think I ever will, but I understand it's an issue. So I've written about it, but it's not necessarily something that I would support. Now, it's one of those things that if it happened, I would have to give it really serious thought. Like, could I relinquish my personal beliefs in order to, say, monetize it? And I don't know. I don't know. I think I struggle with it just thinking about it. It would depend. It would really depend, because, part of this blog is very me. Like, this is very who I am. It's what I think. It's what I feel. So that would mean changing me. I don't know. And I don't know if I would be willing to do that. I can be unbiased if I have to, but there's certain things that I just won't support.
I think one of the things that you've kind of touched on that is very powerful to anybody who's listening is the fact that it is just you. You are not part of the Humane Society of the United States. You're not part of Big Cat Rescue. You're not part of any of these organizations that are already seen as being having an agenda. We all have our agenda that we're going to save animals. Whereas as an individual, I think you have more credibility when you say this is how I feel, because you're speaking as, I started to say, you're speaking as an American and a Canadian.
Yes. Yeah.
But that's the powerful thing, because there's so many people in your audience and in our audience who want to do something for the animals and feel like, well, it's just me. And you are an example of how just you can really have an impact.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, you know, and I think when we emailed, you had mentioned something that you would kind of want to know what I would suggest to people to do. And, you know, it's something I thought about. I'm like, okay, am I going to say something that hasn't already been said? For me, something that I've always, and I can't remember where I got this, but, you know, I think we rely on others to change things. And I think that people have to know that and it's so true, you have to change within yourself. So if it's something you're passionate about, you know, for me, it was this. So I'm like, well, what can I do? So I need to start this as an individual, and we'll see what happens. But you have to, you know, be open to learning new things, you know, do your research. Sometimes you have to look at things that you don't want to look at to be able to convey a message. You really have to look at everything holistically to properly talk about something. So I think that begins with yourself. And, you know, I think sometimes people think, oh, you know, our governments need to do this, and you know, in your case it would be your senators, and here it would be our member of parliament. They need to change. No, we are going to be responsible for that change. So if you change the way that you think about something, and then you're able to talk about it, that's how we can affect change. And all those things are important. You know, we need to change legislation. We need to change laws, and that's a larger fight. But it all begins with us. I think every person as an individual is responsible for that within themselves.
That is such an important message. And one of the very first videos that we ever did, it was back forever
Long time ago.
Yeah. But the ending of it was really nice. It was a volunteer who did this, and he put together like a little slideshow. And the very ending was, if not you, then who? And if not now, then when? And it was like, whoa, man. I mean, that just says it all. And
yeah,
you're doing it, and you're encouraging other people to do it. I think one of it, totally off, well, not totally off topic, but off of that, one of the things I frequently hear from people is they think that animal rescue is funded by the government, and they don't understand why governments don't just change the laws. They think that it is the government who makes up their mind, hey, we're going to change this. And like you just said, no, that comes from each individual person making their voice known and their desires known. Do you have any suggestions to people as to how they can be more effective in getting that message to the people who can make a change?
Well, like I said, it's, you know, try to be as educated as you can about a topic. You know, for me, I'm very lucky. I came from the generation where I learned a lot from books, and I know now that's very different. Everyone goes online, but I think, you know, look at different resources and different viewpoints. Sometimes you're going to read stuff you don't want to read, but I think you need to know that. So once you have that, then you can convey that message. And, you know, this is, again, not reinventing the wheel. You know, volunteer your time. Go to rallies. Knock on the door to your local politician and say, you know, I'd like to have a meeting with you to discuss something. Get a group together. And signing petitions are good. I mean, it's very convenient for people. They do help sometimes. I don't think that all the time they're the answer. So I think people have to be more active and, you know, donate money to organizations that are working on a cause that you believe in. You know, I know right now in Arizona, they have a ballot for the mountain lions, which is fantastic. There's, you know, a lot of horrible things being done with regards to hunting, and I guess the people are now speaking up and saying, you know, we've had enough. So stuff like that. That's a prime example of getting getting everything together and telling your politicians you want change, and then hopefully having that received on the other end. You know, I think that sometimes there's going to be, you know, battles we lose, and that's not great, but you can't let that be discouraging, because then nothing will get done. So you have to be prepared also mentally that sometimes this is the long haul and things aren't going to be done overnight, and I'm watching this Arizona ballot and it's fantastic, and I'm, sharing it on social media. I mean, I'm not even American, but it doesn't matter the issue. It doesn't matter where it is. So hopefully that comes out, but that's a prime example. And yeah, just talk to people, share, social media posts, read blogs, support people that are doing that. And I think that together, like everyone, if we get our voices together, we're actually going to be louder than the other side. But we know that, we do know that, right? So it's just a matter of, finding out a reason, like something that you care, and what's the reason you care, and trying to do something about it. And it begins with opening your eyes, I think. And I think there's a lot of stuff out there, and it's really hard, especially there's a lot of things going on in the world right now, and the political climate is obviously not great, and there's a lot of things that people need to fight for, but we can't forget that this is part of who we are as well. And nature, the environment, and animals is such an integral part to who we are, and it's we need it, and I don't think most of us want to live without it either. So
you mentioned something a couple of times that I think is so important, and that is that we need to expose ourselves to the ugliness that we don't want to look at, because just turning our heads away from it is never going to fix it. And if we don't know what's happening behind closed doors or behind closed gates, then nobody's ever going to know. It's relying on the people who really love animals to get that information and get it out there. I love Facebook because it allows us to reach so many more people than we ever could before, and through targeting audiences, we can find people that care about animal I started to say animal rights. I hate that word, animal rights, but people that care about animal welfare and want to do something. And I've never been able to do that before Facebook. But what I'm finding is I have two different accounts, and I have to log into the separate account because there's this weird thing where Facebook won't let me, as the admin, post to Big Cat Rescue's page, even though I'm the person who created it. So that's so strange. Yeah. When I go live, I can post to it any other way, but I can't go live. So I had to create this other alternative account so that I log in as this other person never does anything social with people, never likes posts or anything. The only thing I do is log in there so that I can be live. And what I find is when I log into that account, the information that I see coming into the feed is so different, because it's not targeting somebody who has said, I like pictures of cats and I like lions. And when I log into my site, I'm only seeing things that agree with my ideas and my point of view. And I think so many people don't realize, because it's been gradual as we've kind of been sucked into this Facebook world, that it's a reality of our own creation, where we think everybody thinks like us and that things are going to be fine. And it's like, no, it's not fine. We've got to get out there and do something. Yeah, no, it's definitely true. And I've had this conversation with other people where, seeing these negative things, it's important, because how else am I going to talk about something? It's the way that we have to then convey it to people. But for the people receiving that, who are, like you said, the animal people, and that's mainly who looks at that and will look at it, it's hard and it's overwhelming. And I know a lot of times I have a hard time, and, I've only recently started kind of giving myself a break from it, because it seems to be nonstop. So, I try not to pass that on constantly to people that follow me. And I see my audiences a little bit differently. Like Twitter, I can do a little bit more than I will do on Facebook, and my blog is different. So I see all these readers and people are slightly different. So Twitter I might get away with a little bit more of that. But it's definitely hard, because it takes a toll on, I think, us. We know this is going on, and it's frustrating, and like, why don't more people care? And we have to realize, and it's something that I've realized, is that people will shut down with too much of it. So you have to maybe take a different spin to it
and still trying to get it out there, but in a way that's not going to turn people off all the time. And then there's some people where it doesn't matter, there's people that are always going to be offended and not want to see it, right? So you can't always think of that as your audience, but you're hoping to get through to people that aren't the converted, because basically that's what we're trying to do. Preaching to the converted is great, and we're doing a lot, but I think that even somebody spoke about this at the conference. It's like, how do you get those people who aren't converted? How do you get them to listen to these horrible things, and then act on it? And then, of course, you have to give them hope or some sort of action. Like, it can't always be, oh, this is it, and there's basically nothing we can do, because that will turn off people. So it's a challenge. And I don't think I'm perfect all the time. And I'm an emotional person when it comes to animals. So it's hard, sometimes you have to rein that in, and sort of, feed it out a different way, so to speak.
You really do become the filter between what people can bear and what people will see, and trying to always adjust that in such a way that you're making the biggest impact possible with the message and not scaring everybody off with horrific images or things that they can't see. Man, if I could unsee half the things I've seen.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, and that's the thing too. And I've been doing a lot of stuff for animals. Like, I've volunteered with animals here, volunteer with local wildlife. I'm around animals all the time. I do cat sitting, and I used to do dog walking. So for me, it was one of these things where, once I started seeing something, and then it spoke to that part of me where it's like, I wanted to know more. And, sometimes when you open that door, you have to be prepared. And, like I've said, it affects me. It definitely affects me. And there's days that are really difficult. And there's times where I have to take a break from things now, because I just, then it just, kind of ruins you on all parts. Like, then, I won't be able to do what I want to do if I do that. But it's definitely helped me be a better voice. So that's kind of the positive, if there can be a positive. Like, I can then pass this on, and maybe someone will see and they'll be like, oh, I live there, I don't like what's going on, like, I'm going to do something about that, or I'm just aware of it now, and then it'll just help people think a little bit differently. But yeah, we're definitely a filter, and it's a hard job being a filter. And I know that there's people that are different than me that see far worse things, that are actually in the thick of it. And sometimes I wonder, like, how do they cope? It's like, how do they deal with it and then still be able to do their job? And it's a challenge. I think it's something that you always learn, and you're always learning about. And I'm not perfect. Nobody is. And I think everybody has their limits. And the best thing, if the advice that I could give to myself, years ago, would be, take a break and don't feel guilty, because I think that also plagues people who are involved in, whether it's, something like you do, or somebody like me that's talking about it, is that you feel guilty because you're not doing it all the time. But you can't. Like, none of us can do this alone. We need everyone to chip in and to know that there are other people doing it, even if you're taking a break.
In the past, I used to drive down, this would happen every 2 or 3 years. I would drive down to the Keys, and I would lay in a hammock for 3 days and just cry. And that's all I did for 3 days straight, was cry. And then I'd be like, all right, I can do this again. And I'd head back to Tampa. And so my daughter finally said, we could build a beach here at the sanctuary, and you could just lay. Yeah. So we built a beach at the sanctuary, and I would just cry in my hammock here. But over the years, I've not had to do that, because now we have so many more volunteers and interns, and there's a support base that I didn't have in the early years. So I'm curious if you said you pull away from it a little bit to get recentered and regrounded. Is there anything else that you do to try and flush out those filters before you come back?
It was interesting. I don't currently have a cat right now. I actually lost him to cancer last year. So, there's a huge amount of research that shows your pets also help heal you. And I found that's one thing that I'm missing now, which, I hope to adopt another cat soon. But he was, when I had those days, I would sit with him, and, it would help. I mean, whether it was his purr or just his look, it's just, something else to focus on. So, even if you don't have a pet, I think it's, a lot of people, including myself, you go for a walk, go outside, enjoy the birds, go look at the ducks in the pond if you have that available to you. Or, sometimes you need to like just watch a fun movie, like go see an action movie that's completely escapism from your life. Like I do that, just do something that you think you shouldn't be doing, do it. Like go see a fun movie or hang out with a friend, and hang out with people who don't talk about this stuff too. Because sometimes, when you're around people who are as passionate and who share it, you tend to focus on it. And sometimes I find that can do the opposite. So sometimes you need those people who are just like, oh yeah, let's go out and have dinner, or let's hang out, let's just do something and not talk about it. So I think those are good options for people. And I just actually was listening to a webinar by Neves, Joanne MacArthur. She's the wildlife she does not wildlife. She does photography, and she does a lot of stuff with animal rights, and she's done a lot of stuff exposing, factory farming and all that. And so she was talking about the same thing, is like, how does she deal with it? And it's basically, you have to kind of, while you're doing it, you focus on what you're doing. You have a job, and then afterwards, you deal with it, or you do something that basically, I hate to say takes your mind off of it, but gives you that break. And, you mentioned crying, and I don't think that's uncommon for anyone who is, overwhelmed with this stuff. I think it's a release. And I think for me, and this is my biggest challenge, and I'm going to say it again, is forgiving yourself for not doing everything all the time, and for not, being, the first person to do something all the time. It's forgiveness is a huge thing, and it's definitely a work in progress for myself. And I think that's what it is. It's just trying to forgive yourself and give yourself a break. It's so hard. It's so much easier me telling you this than to take my own advice sometimes. It really is. It really is.
I know exactly what you mean, sister.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
We've implemented days off here at the sanctuary for not only our staff, but also our interns, so that they have a forced period of time to have to recoup. And yet I don't do it myself, and it's like, I really know I should be taking a day or two off a week, just because you are much more effective if you can kind of get yourself like regrounded and reconnected to the forces out there that power you on.
Yeah, it's hard because, we see so much bad stuff in now, especially there's just so much more that we're dealing with. It's also so easy to be overwhelmed with, there's so many, horrible people out there doing these things. And I think that, stepping back and saying, okay, there's also, a lot of people that are not doing those things that are actually trying to make things better. So I think that's another reminder. And I know I have to remind myself of that as well, is that there are a lot of people trying, they're in their own part, whatever they're doing, to make things better. And that, we're not alone, and all of us, we have to kind of stick together in that. And that's, it's another hard piece of advice to take, but it's something, I guess, even me saying this, it's like, that's a reminder for myself too, right? Yeah.
Well, this has been so lovely. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience?
Well, first of all, I think this is a great honor to do this. This is really exciting. My first interview, so it's amazing. If people are interested in following me, definitely, follow my blog. And if people have questions about anything, let me know. I'm always happy to, direct people if I don't know, or help people out. And one thing has been really important to me lately is, especially people here in North America, I would love for people to start paying a little bit more attention to our own cats here. We're very preoccupied with lions and tigers and leopards and et cetera. And we should be. I'm not saying you give that up at all, but I think that the same sort of passion we show for them, we need to start showing our mountain lions, our lynx, and our bobcats, because they're all facing tremendous issues here, whether it's hunting, trapping, or, it's habitat fragmentation. So there's a lot of similarities. I think we need to really start paying attention to stuff in our own backyard. And that goes for Canada as well. We're so quick to talk about elephants and rhinos, but yet how about bears, wolves, and, mountain lions? So I think that, what we've learned from helping other species, we should kind of concentrate and put into helping our own, because we need it, and we don't want our own animals here to get into trouble where, oh, we have 5,000 mountain lions left or whatnot, where it gets that bad. I think that we have the ability here to come together and to do some good things, and I think that it's something that should be on top of people's minds as well.
Maybe even more so because of the fact that here we have some ability to do something about it.
Yeah.
You really have very limited abilities to do anything about the issues with, tiger habitat in India or the canned hunting industry in South Africa. There's things you can do, but there's so much more that we can and should be doing here locally to protect the animals we do have. And it increases our credibility if we have a healthy, stable population and people who are willing to live with these animals in their backyards and not afraid, I mean in their backyards free, not in cages, then we have a much better standing in the world to say these are the things that you could do to make that possible. If we can't live with cougars, who's going to be able to live with a tiger?
Yeah, exactly. And, in some of those countries, those smaller countries are actually doing better than we are. It's not, nothing is perfect, but they're more apt to try for some reason. So I don't know if it's because a lot of people are very removed from nature here, and, we're shocked when we see it. It's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. So, we had bears in our backyard or mountain lions. It's like, if you live in wilderness, it's what comes with it. So I think, it definitely, like you said, it's credibility and supporting, laws here, helping, change legislation, and especially with the private, the ban on private ownership that your team is working on as well. I think that's really important. Animals, tigers in captivity or big cats in captivity, and private ownership. That's something that we shouldn't have. And even in Canada, like I said, there's a lot of work that needs to be done on that. So it's definitely. It's time for not a full shift, but it's time for us to maybe open up a little bit more and include our own issues in our own backyard.
Absolutely. What is the best way for people to reach you? Is it blog or is it social media?
They can reach me through my blog. So it's purrandroar.com, and my email is listed there. So it's purrandroar@gmail.com. They can send me an email. I'm also on Instagram as purrandroar. Facebook is the same, and Twitter. So, people can reach out any way they prefer, and I answer to all of it. So,
Wonderful. You have been such a delight, Tori. Thank you so much for today.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been great. It's nice to talk about these issues with other people as well, and hopefully help spread the message. So
I think people will find it very encouraging to see what you've done as an individual.
Okay. Thank you so much, Carole.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Take it easy. Bye.